Hello, and welcome to the Reykjavík Newsdesk. I'm Andie Sophia Fontaine, and these are the weekend's top stories in Iceland. If you like the content that you see here, be sure and like and subscribe. And if you really like the content that you see here, check out the Patreon link in the description below to see what kind of goodies you can get just by kicking a little extra coin our way. But now, the weekend's top stories. It's May the 1st, also known as International Workers' Day, and this is a very important holiday in Iceland for a lot of reasons. But first, a little background. In case you weren't aware, May 1st is celebrated as Workers' Day in many countries around the world, and Iceland is amongst them. While May 1st has always been an important holiday in Europe for roughly thousands of years, probably, it arose as a labor holiday in 1886, following a resolution from the American Federation of Labor to push to shorten the working day to 8 hours. You heard that right. Shorten the workday to 8 hours. On May 4th of that year, violence erupted at a labor demonstration in Chicago when the police tried to clear out demonstrators. Somebody, we don't know who, threw a dynamite bomb, and this resulted in 7 police and 4 civilians being killed and many others wounded. 8 anarchists were charged and convicted with having thrown the bomb, despite lack of or even sometimes contradictory evidence, such as not being in Chicago at the time. All but 1 were sentenced to death. And there's a lot of theories as to why the U.S. has Labor Day in September. But what we do know is this guy, U.S. President Grover Cleveland, was worried that having Labor Day on May 1st would remind people of Haymarket, so, make of that what you will. In Iceland, this is typically commemorated with marches held by labor unions, as well as some more radical elements, such as the industrial workers of the world. The marches will conclude with speeches from labor leaders on the importance of workers' rights. Many, if not most, non-essential businesses are closed on May 1st, and employers who make their workers work on May 1st are obliged to pay them a significant bonus, often double time. You see, unions are pretty much institutionalized in Iceland. Like, well over 80% of the workforce are in a union. And even those workers who are not in a union are still protected by the rights laid out in the collective bargaining agreement for the trade that they're in. Strikes do still happen, but here's the thing. Replacing striking workers, otherwise known as scabbing, is illegal here. Anecdotally, I come from a union family, and when I first moved here, bus drivers were on strike, and I didn't see any picket lines, and I asked my friends about this, like, why are there no picket lines if they're on strike? And they were confused by this, and so I asked, well, how are they going to prevent scabs? And I had to explain what scabbing was, and my Icelandic friends were horrified. They were like, you can't do that. It's illegal to replace striking workers. And I was floored. Like, I called my father, who was a union organizer himself, and I told him, hey, scabbing is illegal here, and yeah, he couldn't believe me. Now, despite the fact that scabbing is illegal here, the country is not crippled by constant strikes and workers making unreasonable demands. It's almost as if the nightmare scenarios conjured up by, so we say, less worker rights-oriented voices are not really based in reality. Now, Iceland's labor movement is far from perfect, of course. There have been and continue to be internal struggles within labor unions, in particular between leadership of labor unions and the people that they represent. But one thing that they all agree on is that May 1st is a special day that deserves commemoration. On that note, over 90% of workers in the labor union BSRB have voted in favor of a strike. This strike will see workers in primary schools, grade schools, in after-school centers in Kópavogur, Garðabær, Mosfellsbær, and Seltjarnarnes going on strike. The worker demands are to be paid the same salary that other workers in similar fields are paid. So far, these demands have fallen on deaf ears. However, as is always the case, even leading up to a strike and during a strike, the negotiations table is always open. Gold mining continues to be the dream, or the nightmare, of many in Iceland. Now, there's no disputing the fact that there is gold in Iceland. The dispute basically rests on 2 points. First of all, is there enough gold in any one location to justify mining it? And secondly, can the gold mining be conducted without messing up the environment too badly? On the first point, a company known as Iceland Resources found significant traces of gold in a geothermal area in Reykjavík. So, yes, there likely is enough gold in that area to begin mining. The second point is a bit more contentious. You see, there's a Canadian company called St. George's Eco Mining, under whose auspices Iceland Resources operates, who want to start conducting mining in that area. They insist that they practice something called eco-mining and that it would not harm the environment for them to mine gold in this area. Iceland Resources and St. George have been trying to mine gold in other parts of the country as well. Most famously, Þormóðsdalur in Mosfellsbæ has what appears to be a large gold deposit, and efforts to mine there go back to at least 2017, with the last update on the matter happening in 2020, but so far they haven't been able to start mining in the area, in part due to pushback from local authorities. Auður Una Magnúsdóttir of the Icelandic Environment Association is one of the voices who have objected to the possibility of starting gold mining in this country, saying that Iceland does not need gold mining. In fact, the entire concept of eco-mining is a controversial one. Grant Spore, a senior analyst for metals and mining at Bloomberg Intelligence, has pointed out that there's no set standard for what constitutes green gold. Ultimately, the companies who want to do mining in Iceland will need to convince local authorities that they can do so with minimal environmental impact, and that environmental impact will have to be minimal enough for local authorities to accept. Lastly, we may be able to save our sheep. Now, as I pointed out in a previous video, farmers have been contending with scrapie, which is a highly contagious and incurable disease that can affect sheep and goats. And typically when scrapie is found in a couple of sheep in any given flock, just the entire herd is culled. And that can be very costly to sheep farmers in Iceland, not to mention unfair to the other sheep. However, the government has approved a measure that would wipe out the disease on the genetic level. Firstly, genetic testing of sheep to find scrapie-resistant genes will be done much faster at an accelerated pace, so we'll be able to find the sheep who are resistant to scrapie much more quickly. Secondly, such scrapie-resistant sheep would be raised separately from our current, more vulnerable sheep until such time as hopefully in the future, scrapie-resistant sheep replace our current stock and we're in the clear. That being the case, the future may be bright for them indeed. In any event, that's all I have for you today at Newsdesk. Remember, if you like the content that you see here, be sure and like and subscribe. And if you really like the content that you see here, check out the Patreon link in the description below. Which reminds me, I want to thank Corinne Vasquez, Marion Ward, Christopher Hunter, and Marion Moores for being patrons on the $20 level. Laura Johnson and Kimberly McDaniel for being patrons on the $15 level, and Stephen Ellis and Viva Carvalho Schaffner for being patrons on the $10 level. Speaking of which, there's a poll currently up on my Patreon for those on the $15 and $20 level, wherein viewers decide the next single topic video that I do, and it appears as though there's a three-way tie right now. So if any of you want to subscribe to my Patreon just for the sole purpose of breaking the tie on this poll, I, for one, would really appreciate it. Otherwise, I'm just going to do all three topics. So in any event, that's all the news I have for you today. Be good to each other.